Well, good morning, late timers who are perhaps early in time, those of you who are attempting to attain your enlightenment or gain your salvation through the use of the workbook of A Course in Miracles or any other kind of modality that by necessity would have to involve forgiveness and the relinquishment of the temporal association. Can't take anything with you when you go, and salvation, of course, is the end game. I just watched the end game, Avengers Endgame. It's a bit different to how I imagine an end game would look, but salvation is the end game of the human experience, wherein you realise all of a sudden the pointlessness and the emptiness of the experience of the belief in separation, and begin the transformative process, the purification of the mind, wherein you take responsibility for the alpha and the omega of time to bring yourself to the here and the now, as well as taking total responsibility for the effects of your own thinking, which is your, I don't know if you want to call it your emotional footprint. But one of the lines that I like from the teacher Jesus, I was going to say my saviour Jesus, but really my salvation comes from me as an association with Jesus or with Buddha or Krishna or whatever. So just getting a bit pinpointy there. But and I lost it. Never mind. That completely just went blank then. So obviously not meant to delve into that. But if you were following along there intently, you'll be like at one of those moments of like, what? And that happens a lot in salvation. All of a sudden you'll be thinking of one little track of thought, or it'll just be flowing, and then all of a sudden you'll catch yourself, and then the next moment, boop, something else. So it may come back. But anyway, so what I thought I would get into is the idea of death. I've been walking along the beach here, which is a very beautiful beach, and wondering to myself, all right, like, what's today's video subject going to be? And I thought, well, I haven't really done one on death, and I had somebody the other day ask me, can you do a video on death? So I guess this is it. And they're a very varied. We tend to think of death as being the end moment of the body, of the vessel, the avatar. But if you're a student of A Course in Miracles, you'll probably realise that he says death takes many forms. Even the slightest sigh of discontent when you forget what you're talking about. So death takes many forms. But all form association is a symbolic representation of the idea of death. So in the Course in Miracles, you have going from the dream of separation to the happy dream, right? Even the happy dream is rooted in death. Now, this is something you have to hear, right? Because even though it's the jump-off point for the experience that solidifies your salvation and all of that sort of thing, guarantees that the relationship is restored with you and your Father, let's say, or you and your creative source. Even that happy dream is a dream wherein the transition from the old idea of I hate the world, I don't know what anything's for, it's meaningless, pointless, to aha, I have a purpose, blah, 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 blah. It's still within the city of death, within the realm of death, right? So the entire spectrum of the physical nature of life, the third dimension, is a symbolic playground, if you like, or a symbolic representing of an idea of separation from God, and God being life, therefore the separation from life must be death, or what we give a word to as death. Right now, in the Course he also says the opposite of life is not death, but another form of life. Right? Because if life is eternal and life is all-encompassing, you cannot have life and then not life. It must be the one thing. So in this paradigm, let's say, from the unforgiven dream, we look out and we think, oh, everything here dies, everything's going to be reaching its finality point at some time, and when's mine coming, etc., etc. But we're missing the point in that we are in an experience of another form of life with this avatar, much like playing a game on an Xbox or something. When you have an avatar on the screen, the virtuality of the physical realm is something that we take for granted. We've been playing the game for so long, we've finally reached a point where we realise we've played it, there's nothing else here we want to play with, and now what? And at that point you're either going to become very depressed and perhaps suicidal, or you're going to start inquiring into things based on keeping an open mind, which will ultimately lead you to a spiritual determination, because that is the only alternative available in the world. Everything external represents death, everything internal is spiritual, or mind. So spirit is the Latin word for the Greek word mind, which comes from the word psyche, which means to think and to remember. So life is essentially thought, but we seem to find ourselves in an experience of thought made manifest as physical stuff. But it's only the power of our mind that tells us this is real, and if I poke my finger on something sharp, a prickle or something, it's going to hurt, and it's all in here, all in here. The power of the mind is everything. And there are plenty of research studies that I've watched on videos and things over the years from different universities and stuff about illusions and what are they called, those optical illusions, where you think you're seeing something but it's actually something else, and that's just a very small tip of the iceberg. And the nature of the holographic universe that we find ourselves in is that I have my own holographic experience with my own characters and experiences within the thing. It's exactly the same as yours, because we share one mind. It's one mind experiencing this, but yet you seem to have your own form associations, but yet it is one mind waking up. So when I extract my little piece out of the hologram, it doesn't change anything other than that I'm not in it for everybody, in every experience. But in your own experience, there will be someone else, such as another identity that you'll associate with the idea of salvation, playing a part for you. So, which is what we consider to be like, the contemporary or the standard idea of death, really. So, death in A Course in Miracles takes many forms, from anger to the ideas of defense. I must keep what's mine and you stay over there. And I often like to look at all these things. I was actually walking along here this morning and bumped into a woman walking a dog coming the other way. We had a little bit of a chat, and she kept looking at my chest, and I guess I've got tattoos and everything all over it, and the old whale's tooth here. But in my mind, I started making up stories. What's she looking at? Why is she looking at my chest? And we have this funny thing in Australia. I've seen t-shirts that say, I'm up here, with an arrow pointing up here. For guys, women will wear them, like, here, connect with me, here, connect with where it's at. But I realised in looking at my chest, all these ideas about, well, I can't look at her chest, she's got clothes on, and all this sort of stuff, and suddenly referring that, this is a bit of a long-winded one maybe, but referring that as an idea of separation, albeit kind of funny, but an idea of separation. And I started like going into that thought avenue, I guess, where I'm looking at man's laws, where you can't walk on the beach without a shirt in certain countries, but unless you're a man, then you can. And this whole thing of the animal law, so animal law has no laws per se, but animals don't wear clothes, they get on perfectly well. And when I had an experience of being beyond the physical nature of the third dimension, and was greeted by blue beings from an astral dimension, I guess, if you want to call it. Some people call them Arcturians. I don't really know what to call them. They weren't wearing any clothes at all. So it kind of brought me into this moment of confrontation with all my ideas about laws and what should and shouldn't happen and everything. And I suddenly realised I was buying into an idea of death. It was a verification process about the body. All right? Trying to nut and bolt my thinking about what should or shouldn't look like something in the world, rather than just accepting things exactly as they are. And that was a funny one. It's like death takes many forms, I tell you. And you can get caught up in these cause and effect relationships, and then examining it with your pointy little brain and trying to work out things based on the idea that you're trying to do something spiritual here and make a determination spiritual. None of it, right? And that's what ultimately leads you to the happy dream, where you realize that none of my thoughts mean anything, and it's the dream away from death, where you are relinquishing the association that you have with the external world in favor of deferral to a higher power, to God, universal creator, whatever, for an experience which is always going to be in the moment, not of your own making, incrementally, what would you call it? What's that? Whatever. It just gets more and more and more. There's a word for it. Nah, gone. But anyway, that's the happy dream, where you find yourself in a place where you realize that your associations in the world are sort of fading away, and you find yourself more in the world but not of it, right? But it's still within the framework of death, right? Now, if you're equating death with the idea of that being something bad and something you're afraid of, whatever, you're probably going to be glad about having an alternative, but at some point you have to lay the body aside, regardless of whether you find yourself in a fearful mindset or a loving mindset. Right? Now, my mindset to date is, if I had to describe it as the residue, and I'm talking about the Dave, the entity that you can see and touch and hear and everything like that, not me as I am as the Christ with you, but just referring to my physical self again as, let's say, an entity undergoing the metamorphosis or the transition of its mind through the utilization of the principles of A Course in Miracles and the technology of forgiveness and all of that sort of thing, which is not what forgiveness is as understood by the world. But I would have to say my mind's completely peaceful. Whereas at one point it used to be this rebellious kind of rambling non-stop, even into my sleeping it would just chat. Now, unless I'm talking, there's nothing there. There's occasionally a few things will pop in, like with the woman on the beach, and I'll look at some idea. And then I'll catch myself looking at that idea, and it's kind of funny, I laugh at myself. What do you think there's something still back there in that old dream of death that you value, and it's a funny thing. But there's a line in the Bible where Jesus says, I must become less so that he may become more. And in the vein of that teaching, in my own recognition, I can see that I'm becoming less as a human. I don't know if that's the right word, because obviously you equate human with the body, but as a human consciousness, and more as a nothing consciousness, as something that is falling away in favor of the emergence of the Christ consciousness, which is, let's say, behind or being shielded by the residue of the blessed residue, Jesus calls it in A Course in Miracles, but being shielded by the residue of my old, now fading temporal association. But it will still be that until the moment I lay it down. So it's not that you can ever abandon your ego. You can't, because it doesn't exist in the first place. But you can retrain your mind from its beliefs in the idea that the ego is part of you, or is a real thing, because it's just an idea. It's a separation what would you call it? It exists as potential or as possibility. But if you engage in the potential, if you engage in the possibility of the idea that it can determine your reality and that your reality is determined externally, it can have tragic effects indeed. The least of which will be wondering about why somebody can wear a shirt and somebody else doesn't have to. This is kind of funny. Anyway, there is no death. You know, there's no death. There's nothing to fear. God goes with you everywhere you go. And as you do these workbook lessons, if you haven't heard of A Course in Miracles, it's an incredible spiritual teaching tool where you have a text, a workbook, and a teacher's manual. And there are several editions of it. I'm responsible for the white edition. You can find that online. The workbook of it, like the incredible nature of it and the miraculous nature of it, is in the doing of the lessons in the workbook, one a day for a whole year, and you will begin to see if you give it total value, not like I'll give that some value and then my world some value. You have to give it priority and total value above, and like Jesus said, give up the world and follow me. And if you still have concerns for what's going on in the world, you're not ready. Simple as that, you're not ready. If you're feeling depressed, suicidal and anxious, you're probably ready. If you're done with everything, you're ready. You know, and it doesn't take much to look out into the world and realise that no matter what avenue you walk down, it all ends the same way. You know, spectacles, testicles, fob chain and wallet. That's one from my dad, my earthly dad. Anyway, be honest, you know, you have to be honest. It's like, to thyself be true. And if you're not done with the world, like, forget about spirituality and all of this stuff for a minute and go put it aside and go out there and pursue what you want, so you can just see what it really gets you, which is really nothing. And I hate to be the bloody, what do they call that, where you spoil the end of the movie? But time is short. Time is short. The world is old and tired and without hope. That's from Jesus, not from me. And I know all you people that like Greta Thunberg and all of that like to think that she represents this idea of hope. But in a paradigm, in a dimension where everything dies, where everything comes to an end, there's a beginning and an ending, planets, stars, little baby creatures and everything. Give up all hope. Give up all hope, all ye who enter here. And literally, giving up all hope is the key in the lock of learning to accept that the world is not your home, that you're not from here, that it's an illusion, that you can pursue an alternative line of inquiry that will lead you step by step, day by day, lesson by lesson, if you're doing the workbook lessons of A Course in Miracles, to a indisputable conclusion and experience about yourself. Little powerful moment there. So I have this light in my mind now that goes, you know, when I make an absolute declaration, I'm the Christ and so are you. And it's something that I can take on board and do in my meditations, which, as the idea of a Dave saying that I'm doing something, whatever, it's false, but it assists having the experiential light within yourself whenever you want it. It used to be black. I used to close my eyes and meditate and there'd be this blackness, and now there's this peripheral golden ring of light. It's like a halo that's used to be up here, but it's slipped down a bit. I'm hoping to kind of push it back up where it belongs. But, there we go, done. And, you know, it assists in the witnessing to the internal realm. It's like a postcard from home. The golden light is our home. It's like we are beings of light, not flesh. We are spirit. And yeah, it's just very beautiful and very powerful. And to quote the old man, I'm not a 78-year-old body or something. I think I'm 60 this year. Oh no, I'm 58 or 57 or something. Anyway, I don't know. But it's just a funny thing, you know, like that I'm not this, but I'm able to sit and say that I'm not this, but I can't show you what I truly am. You have to find that for yourself. I'm just an avatar in your dream, declaring to you, this is a dream. There is no world. You are whole and perfect as God created you, sinless forever, shining in the radiant love, which is the extension of the creative power of the universe, which is what we say, Amen, God is. I am. Words do it no justice, but I'll try till my last breath. I think I'll just keep it going. Like even Jesus on the cross, and I'm not talking, you know, I didn't just reference myself with Jesus there particularly, but even Jesus on the cross, his last breath, forgive them, Father, they know not what they do, you know, give up the ghost. Try and stop me talking. Try and stop me laughing. It's funny. It's really funny. All right, I love you. Take it easy. Do your lessons. I'm posting them, anyone in Australia or in the Southern Hemisphere, I'm posting them, or actually in the time zone we're in now, I'm posting them the day before, actually. You've probably noticed that. For people in other time zones who've said to me, oh, we don't get it until the next day, so I'm whatever. Okay, I love you. Ciao.